Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out. Sorry I'm late. This is one of the more confusing buildings that exists, apparently. I'm Yue Jiang. It's your Chinese, 我姓姜，上海的姜，越黑的越。And I'm a professor in the statistics department. Been here for a few years now. I was asked to provide a guest lecture on communication, which is a super, super important skill for any statistician, because you can be, the best person in the world at math all you want, but if you can't communicate your results or your conclusions to others, then really what good is your analysis? So just quick show of hands, who is a PhD student? Sweet. After the first year, I assume. If you're looking for electives, I'm just going to plug my course. I'm teaching Stat 690 in the fall. You guys probably have a survival analysis course, but it's the first time that we're teaching survival on the college side. But yeah, so I'm teaching a survival analysis class in the fall, if you're looking for electives. All right. At any point, please interrupt me if you have any questions. I talk really fast. But mostly today, we're going to be going through some examples of published work that has a lot of citations and that people love, but that could use varying degrees of help. And we're going to talk about how keeping a critical eye on reviewing your own work can help you be a better statistician, a better collaborator in the future. So what do we mean by review? Who has submitted a manuscript for a review before? Be brave, hands up high. Okay, great, great. Who is in the process of writing a manuscript, perhaps for peer review? Okay. Who has perhaps been reviewed maybe at a job or by someone who is in a position to say, hey, these are some of the strengths, these are some areas you can work on. Who has ever been reviewed by someone else before? Maybe you're like, I don't know, working at an ice cream shop and they're like, you're bad at ice cream. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so what do we mean by review when it comes to statistical manuscripts and these sort of collaborations that we work on? When we review something, it could be our own work, it could be the work of others. We are trying to identify in a completely impartial way what are some of the strengths, what are some of the weaknesses of the work in question, and this is often with a purpose, right? And perhaps the purpose is to improve yourself or suggest improvements for others. Maybe it's part of a decision-making process. For instance, will my paper get accepted, or are you going to accept the paper? Something that I'm dealing with right now, will my grant get funded, let's say, right? So there's often a decision-making process as part of the review, and as such, you have to be very impartial, very dispassionate in order to provide an objective evaluation. And so when you are asked to review a piece of work, or when you're reviewing your own work, sorry, it's like really hot outside, and I just over here. It's always good to be constructive, be helpful, right? Even if you identify some areas of improvement, be very constructive in what you say. So providing helpful feedback, both positive and negative, about just some of the strengths and weaknesses. And here's a very important note that is a little bit difficult for, let's say, mathy type students, which is just because there's nothing technically wrong with what you've done doesn't mean that what you've done is good. Right? So maybe you're taking a math test and you're writing your equations and nothing is wrong. Great, you got 100%. But that's not actually the way that things work in the real world. Just because nothing is incorrect doesn't mean that something is, let's say, worthy of publication or, in more concrete terms, worthy of a name. So when you are creating your own works, when you are writing your manuscript, submitting your grants, etc., or even on the job, when you're conducting your project and presenting what you've done to your supervisors, let's say, it's not enough to just not make any mistakes. You have to motivate why what you've done was important and why other people need to hear that. So I'm going to suggest a framework that was given to me by a writing professor, actually, for how to critically review your own work and also the work of others. And that's the describe, evaluate, suggest framework. And I have examples of peer reviews that I've written, which I might actually show. But I follow this framework. So first, describe what you perceive the message of the work to be. Because if just right out of the gate, you aren't describing accurately what the author is doing, perhaps that's a problem with you as a reviewer, or perhaps that's a problem with the author in that they're not being clear enough in what they're trying to say. Okay, so describe what you think the overall message is. and then evaluate whether that was effective or not in what you think the author's intended purpose was. And then if there is room for improvement, perhaps suggest a helpful way to improve. And you all should have these slides. And so I'm not going to go through the next 4 of those slides in detail. But generally, when we write any sort of manuscript collaboratively, or even just any sort of work, you'll find that it overall has very similar frameworks, like a very similar structure. We start with the introduction, we might go to the methodology, our results, and then a discussion. So this 4-part framework, you'll go through many papers and you'll see that they all have variations on this common theme, right? So introduction, methodology, results, discussion. And so when I'm looking at my own work, or let's say the work of students or others or peers, let's say, I do have kind of like a mental checklist of questions that I'm trying to evaluate. Did the manuscripts answer these questions for me? And I've written them down. And so I'm not going to go through them all. You can all read probably way faster than I can speak. But just in your own time, just take a look at these questions. And they're not comprehensive, but they do a pretty good job of summarizing what is the purpose of each of these sections, how can each of these sections succeed in helping the overall product that you're looking at. And I mean, I wouldn't technically use it as a checklist, but almost like a pseudo checklist, right? Is my manuscript or is this section of work that I'm evaluating for myself answering these questions? And if not, I better have a really good reason as to why I'm not answering, for instance, why there were issues with reliability or validity. All right, so I really wanted to make a super interactive session, so everyone's vaguely close enough. So we're going to go through 2 examples. One is going to be rather short, and then one is going to be more involved. Okay, so this is all published literature, and I would actually like you to practice critically evaluating the works of others, see if there are things that you might find strong or could use some improvement, and then take those same lessons into your own work, right? If you see a piece of like a manuscript and you say like, oh, interesting, their p-value is 0.08, but then they said that there's evidence that there's no relationship here, okay? And you tag that as incorrect. Anyone know why that might be an incorrect statement? P-value, let's say alpha is 0.05, their significance level, they got a p-value of 0.08, the author said, oh, our p-value is above our significance level, there's no relationship. Is that okay? Do you like that? No, what's wrong with that statement you raised? Yeah.
P-value doesn't talk about the relationship, it talks about how significant the relationship is.
Okay, so maybe p-values are a statement about statistical significance. Any other issues? Yeah.
No, but the authors talk about.
Okay, so maybe I didn't give it a research question. Let's say, mean, difference between A and B, p-value is 0.08. They're concluding that there's no difference. Are we okay with that?
They did not set a significance level before.
Okay, their significance level is 0.05. Let's say they set it up. So their p-value, they found something that was not significant. They got 0.08, so they said there's no difference between the 2 groups. Do we like that statement?
They give indication no statistical difference between the 2 variables, because when we set an hypothesis, let's say the null hypothesis is maybe the mean of A because the mean, so we can rewrite that to be mean of A minus mean of B to be 0.
Okay, so you're all very good lawyers in telling me like maybe the correct way that you've been taught to write it. Why specifically is the author's statement wrong? And I'm also going to say it's a lot easier when you know that there is a mistake here, right? I'm telling you there's a mistake. It's a lot harder to find it when you don't know there's a mistake.
Not enough evidence.
Okay, so there's not enough evidence for what?
To support the hypothesis, the pre-specified.
Okay, very close. Yeah.
Just because it's greater than 0.05, it doesn't think this. I mean, 0.08 is still a pretty small spot.
Okay, so you're using words like disprove and pretty small.
It's because even though this data set doesn't give enough evidence, it doesn't mean in the reality that there's no difference.
Sure, yeah, so that's definitely part of it. let's actually just take a tangent. Who can be very brave and tell me what a p-value is? What is a p-value? Yeah. Not quite. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so assuming that the null hypothesis is correct, the p-value tells us the probability of observing what we observed under the null hypothesis.
Okay, great. So the p-value is conditional probability, right? Given that the null hypothesis is correct, what's the probability that we see data like ours or even more different? Sure, under that hypothesis. Okay, so it's a conditional probability that assumes the null hypothesis is true. Okay, so great, we've established what the p-value is. So why is, let's say, okay, we have two groups, group A and group B, we're looking at the mean between them. Our alpha is 0.05, we've got a p-value of 0.08. Authors say, our p-value is not statistically significant, so we have enough evidence to say that there's not a difference between the two. What else? Any ideas? But from this side of the class, any ideas why that statement might not be correct? Actually, it's not correct. So our p-value was not statistically significant. We have evidence that there's no difference. Maybe I'm wrong, right? So we think that statement's okay. I'm wrong all the time. Yeah.
I was going to say that p-values are like an indicator of the amount of evidence we have against the null, and so they're kind of evaluated on the spectrum. And so a p-value of 0.08 is a lot closer to the side of, like, we have a lot more evidence against. It's not statistically significant, but there is still like evidence.
Okay, thinking like a Bayesian, so not under the frequency paradigm, but perhaps if this were like a Bayesian posterior probability, we might be able to do something like that. All right, one last opportunity until someone is just itching to. All right, yes.
Oh, it's the specific on 0.05, right?
Okay, sure. Not that is a correct statement, but again, just making correct statements isn't always enough to explain why something's going on. Yeah.
So again, I get me totally off. What feels wrong to me is we fail to reject the null. That's what the fact that our p-value is not significant. We fail to reject the null, and so we don't necessarily have evidence to say there is no relationship. We just don't have enough evidence to say there's. Well, I'm talking in circles, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So that's exactly right. So anyone here major in classics by any chance? No. I said. Anyone heard of the 5 good emperors of Rome? Kind of, okay. Antoninus Pius? No? Okay, so for those under, let's say, generally continental jurisprudence, in a court of law, at least in America and in, let's say Commonwealth nations and stuff too, there's sort of the notion of innocent until proven guilty, right? So who here has watched like Law and Order? Law and Order. Who's in Law and Order? Okay. What's the verdict when someone's guilty? What do they say? They're like, oh, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Okay. What's the opposite? Like, what do they say if that's not the case? Like, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Not guilty, right? So they don't find innocence. So the job of the jury wasn't to find innocence, it was to find sufficient evidence. Okay, so under the frequentist paradigm, and I say this, I'm in Duke staff Bayesian world, but under the frequentist paradigm, the p-value is not used to assess evidence for the null hypothesis, right? It's just because we assume that to be true. Under the fact that the null hypothesis is true, what's the probability we see what we see, or even more extreme? If that is a low enough probability, we have enough evidence to say, I don't think the null hypothesis is true, something else is happening. But if we don't have enough evidence, we weren't looking for evidence that the null hypothesis is true. So we can't affirmatively say, there is no difference here. So all we can say is there wasn't enough evidence for us to think that there was a difference. Okay, so you see this in like online Reddit arguments all the time, right? Like absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. So just because we don't have enough evidence to say that there is a difference here does not mean that we have evidence that there is no difference. Okay, this is a huge tangent. Any questions on that?
You say it again, absence of evidence, not evidence of absence?
Yeah, exactly. So probably is. Anyone major in philosophy? What did everyone major in? Let's just call it out. What did you major in as undergrad? I majored in statistics. Okay. Statistics, okay. Who didn't major in statistics or math or computer science or economics?
I have a minor in biology, but
Excellent, great. Or biology. Okay, great. So no one's philosophy major, that's okay. Russell's teapot, I think, is the thing that you should Wikipedia about the difference between. Oh, I could be wrong. I didn't major in philosophy, but the absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. So maybe in your own work, now you are all very familiar with what a frequency-null hypothesis and p-value are. You come across a paper, you're reviewing it, and they make a statement like, there's evidence that these two are the same, or we found, evidence to support that they're the same. You're like, wait, that's not correct, right? So that act of critically reviewing other people's work can help in your own, right? So recognizing some of these mistakes that other people make will help you in your own work. All right, great. So, yeah, we have time to do both of them. Oh, any quick questions? Has anyone taken a Bayes course? Sweet. I think Sam Birchwick is teaching a second course in that in the spring. Just got a copy with him yesterday. All right, so let's take just 5 minutes. Let's say 5 minutes, okay? And just read the abstract, and feel free to work together on this, okay? And then afterwards, I'm going to ask you to just briefly summarize what this study was about. Evaluate whether you think their study was effective in evaluating their research question, right? So what was the point of the research question? They performed a study evaluating whether text messages were effective in getting people to get back to their appointments. Okay, evaluate whether using only what you know from the abstract, they were effective. And if there is room for improvement, perhaps suggest something that might be improved. So I will say on the next page, I give you everything that they have on statistical methodology. Okay, so oftentimes in these sort of biomedical trials, the focus of methodology is on the medicine or the clinical work. There's really not that much on the statistical or data side. So if you're curious, on the next slide has the just the details on the statistics. And if there are any terms that you don't know or haven't heard of, write them down. I'm interested in what you might not have heard of. One is intention to treat. Not everyone knows what intention to treat is if they haven't. But yeah, so I'll give you, let's say 5 minutes and then I'll check back in. Please just read the abstract and then talk briefly about people who are close to you. And I'll say this is published, I think it was published in BMJ, or BMC Health Services, okay. I think it was cited a few times, more than a few times. This has gone through peer review. This is in a reputable journal. It has been cited by other people who clearly found their work to be useful and interesting. Okay, so this is not a bad study. Nothing I'm showing is a bad study. That's not true. The next one sucks. But this is fine. Okay, so take some time, review it. We'll come back together and discuss.
And everyone should have received the slides. It's easier to read on your computer.
Is anyone not a B&B student?
I think like a handful in the HIV internship.
Ah, cool. Nice.
From dad here.
Right. Yeah.
Some from outside too.
We talked about how there's no good Vietnamese student here. I remember in the Oh yeah, you should enroll in 6-9. Yeah. Or self-filtration. I think right now it's like 5 undergrads and 4 PhD students and no master's students.
What day is the 6-9?
Tuesday, let me check. But there's Tuesday, Thursday, I'm fairly certain. No. It is Tuesday, Thursday, 10:05.
I think it coincides with what Malcolm talked before.
Oh, nice. Wait, what course is that? Oh, that's more useful. You should say.
Why?
Way more useful. You're teaching choreography? Oh my God. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's nice.
He's
He's really good. Great question. What does non-inferiority mean? So real quick, if you generally, when you see clinical trials, they want to prove superiority, right? My new drug is better than what already exists. There are two other types of clinical trials that do exist. One is called an equivalence trial, and one is called a non-inferiority trial. Specifically, a non-inferiority trial looks at, is there not enough evidence that my drug is worse? So I just want to say that like mine is not worse than what's already available. Generally, you see non-inferiority or equivalence trials when you have a generic manufacturer. So you want to say like my generic Lipitor is not worse than Lipitor at reducing. Anyone taken a clinical trials class?
Is that next year?
The second year? Cool. Do you know who teaches it? Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, just the first time. They're both great. They're both amazing. I love them both. Who has also read some of the statistical analysis section? Not needed. Okay, that's fine. So, just in the sake of, for the sake of time, or in the interest of time, what are some initial reactions? Let's vote. We must vote. Okay. And here are your three options. Yeah, this is great. Okay, that's one option. It's okay. Second reaction, and this was bad. Third reaction. Okay. Everyone must vote. Yeah, this is great. This is a good study. I like it. Great study. Okay, be brave. Great. Excellent. Okay. How about it's okay? All right. And what about no? No, we don't like this study. I think everyone did vote. Okay, so for those that said that it was just okay, clearly there are some aspects of it that you're not satisfied with. But before we get there, why don't we start by describing what you think the purpose of the study is and what the authors did. Okay, who would like to briefly summarize? What did the authors do? Let's hear from people who have not yet spoken. Let's do this side of the room again. What do you think the purpose of the study was? What did the authors do?
More efficiency in the
Okay, so it was a clinical trial. What were they trying to evaluate?
Like the proportion of appointments.
Yeah, exactly, right? So their outcome is looking at the proportion of, let's say, missed or canceled appointments. Why is that important? Why do they care? It's important to think about this topic. Maybe use your own life as some motivation.
It's hard to get another appointment, especially for certain.
Definitely. So certainly in this country where we don't know how medicine works, it is hard to get let's say you need to see a specialist. And if you miss your appointment, well, you have to wait 3 months, right? I think this, where was this conducted? I think this was conducted in, I forget where, in the EU. But in terms of missing follow-up appointments, it's important just for patient care, right? If you are a doctor trying to provide longitudinal care for your patients, and you say things like, you know, try X, Y, Z, and come back in a few months, and we'll see if it's working. And if it's not working, we'll do something else, right? It's important for you to get follow-up care in order to get the best health care. Okay, great. So they conducted this clinical trial looking at a portion of missed or canceled appointments, and what did they conclude? And I know I just tricked you with what a p-value is and what it isn't. They specifically did a non-inferiority trial, so for only this specific case, it is okay that they said that the rates were similar. Okay, so only because of this, it's okay. Okay, I just told you the answer. They found that the rates of missed appointments were similar in the text messaging group versus the we're going to call you group. What was another conclusion that they found? Yeah.
So they're both well accepted.
Okay, they're both well accepted. And last most important thing, yeah.
Messaging is more cost effective.
Great, the texts are more cost effective, right? You don't need to pay someone to actually call someone on the phone. You can just send out 1,800 texts at once. Perfect, okay. All right, and then they say, yeah, that's basically the conclusion, right? They did a clinical trial. They found that text messages weren't worse, but they were way more cost effective. We're going to recommend text messages. So for those students that said it was an okay trial, what were some potential reasons why you said it was just okay and not good? And what suggestions might you have for improving what they've done? Yeah.
I think I'm more concerned about the methodology.
Okay.
Because they just said they use a randomized control non-inferiority, which is how they assign many participants, right? So like I'm more concerned about the underlying methodology and the analysis, like the results that they give.
Okay. So they did randomly assign patients to either receive a text message or a call, and the control was the call, what they've already done. So what specifically was concerning about their study design?
Well, I think the underlying approach is about the methodology of non-inferiority.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so perhaps that's an area of improvement. So I'm just going to put myself in the office shoes and maybe defend the study a little bit. What has always been done is to get a reminder by phone. There has to be someone, a staff, a hospital staff that has to call you, say, don't forget about your appointment. Okay? That takes a lot of human hours and is very costly. So these authors wanted to say, is there something that we can do that's pretty similar in terms of like getting people to show up that's easier and cheaper? And so that's why they did a non-inferiority. They didn't necessarily want to show that text messages were better. If they're better, then that's great. But if we're not worse, we're doing just as well, but we're cheaper and we don't have to pay people to like call other people, then we're going to say that's great also. So that's why they would do it non-inferiority. Just like that. Yeah, bottom off the office. Yeah.
I guess it might have been nice to have like, oh, there should be a control.
Okay, great. So they say that it was controlled, but maybe a third baseline comparator group of just people that don't get any reminders at all. Would it be cost effective just to do nothing, right? If it's saying group things, let's just do nothing. Okay, perhaps.
So maybe when it comes to random selection, maybe there have been some other kind of sampling techniques that would have been used, maybe stratification,
Okay, sure. So we like the fact that they use random sampling, but maybe they could have done random sampling within strata or something to perhaps reduce the variance in your estimates to get higher precision for your estimate. Sure, maybe there is a way that they could have done that as well.
There might be a chance that the population of people with cell phones not same as the general population, not really much.
Okay, so that's a good thought. Not necessarily randomized, but not generalizable. So maybe the point is that perhaps people who have cell phones differs systematically in a way from the general population. So maybe our results can only be generalized to those patients that have cell phones. Okay, great. So all, excellent points, excellent suggestions. Overall, I think it's okay. I do have one big problem with what they've done in the statistical analysis. All right, so just take maybe 2 minutes or so, read the statistical analysis portion, And I would like you to react to whether you think they did an acceptable thing, or if there was room for improvement in their analysis. And I will say that my biggest issue with what they did was in their statistical analysis. Don't worry about intention to treat. I will say, again, it's easier if you know that there's a problem with the analysis. I have a problem with, let's say, something in the second half of the paragraph. And please talk with your fellow cohort mates.
That's a good thought, and it's very, I'm glad that you made it. I think maybe like that is age. A little bit wider, you hear it so random.
Oh, that wasn't provided to you, but they're looking at whether maybe you have a really shitty doctor and no one shows up to the check. Versus maybe there's someone else that really they wanted to.
So once you have the conversation, so it's really like before they started the information,
What's your sex? What's your age?
Again, I think this is where we're very strict. So we're looking to find superiority. They're saying, but if it's less than 0.5, that's saying one of these model is because because we're looking at rate. Well, that was all other that's for
So I think the only,
so
the only
I don't expect
one that they have done, the one that they don't, even for the cell, artificial group.
but they're saying we did others.
All right, so here are some great discussions, but again, in the interest of time, I'll have to cut it short. What specifically you know, and also a very valid answer is, I'm happy with what they've done. But there was something that I didn't quite like about their analysis. Did you guys happen to find some things that you didn't quite like about what they've done?
I don't know why they excluded the appointment that was kind of.
Oh.
They're trying to compare missed appointments. The cancelled appointment is the personal trainer. They exclude that whole part from the analysis.
Yeah, so they perhaps didn't explain why they're excluding some of the canceled appointments. They said independently from the intervention, but who's to say? Anything else? Yeah.
So I do have the issue I have with this is based on the student test and the chi-square, because it depends on the response variable.
Yeah.
If the response variable is a kind of maybe categorical and we're comparing it with this, I don't think we should be using the student test. Right.
So totally. So at that point, they used whichever one was more appropriate, right? So if you're saying what's the mean age between the two groups, we're going to t-test. We're going to say what is, let's say, the ethnic heritage of these two groups, and we use a score test, let's say. So we're just saying for the baseline characteristics, if it was continuous, we use the t-test. If it was categorical, we use the chi-square test. That's what they've done. Yeah.
Let me think through this. So they are saying that if p-value is less than 0.05, it's significant.
Okay.
The way that I don't know this for sure, but the way that they've constructed it, it feels like a p-value of less than 0.05 is saying that the groups are significantly different.
Oh, yes, they are. For the non-inferiority version. Don't worry too much about that. The non-inferiority trials are a little confusing. Don't worry too much about that. So I have a series of more structured follow-up questions. What was the goal of their study? It was to see whether the rate of canceled or missed appointments was different between these two groups. How do they specifically evaluate that outcome in their study? Yeah.
Are you saying, they looked at the baseline hash rate to kind of compare between the two here?
I didn't make that assertion. I'm just saying.
Or it's just, I don't really know what odds rate. Like I'm not that so I don't really know what odds ratio.
Oh, an odds ratio is like maybe you have a 3-to-1 odds of success. You have a 2-to-1 odds of success. The odds ratio is 1.5.
So isn't it all just missing enough?
Yeah, that's what they've done. So that's how they calculated the outcome, right? So they calculated the odds ratio of missing appointments between the treatment group and the control group, let's say. So like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe her question is where I'm getting a little bit confused, because it feels like they calculated the odds ratio.
Okay.
Right, and if you calculate a confidence interval for the odds ratio, you can technically draw inference, right? But I'm curious where that p-value is coming from. Like, what test is it? A two-sample.
Oh yeah, so it's whether the odds ratio is 1 or not is what they tested. So one quick thing, they said that we define non-inferiority as a difference below 2% in the rate of missed appointments. So one thing that I kind of am iffy about is instead of an odds ratio, they said we compared the rate of missed appointments between both groups. So they should have done what is the difference, the difference in proportion there. There is one other thing that they didn't do incorrectly, but I think would be a very strong improvement. Maybe.
Might be something related to the healthcare provider.
Okay, maybe switch.
The healthcare provider.
Sure.
They mentioned the randomization of patients, but nothing at all about the healthcare. And now, when it comes to the analysis, they suddenly talk about
Okay, yeah, so you're getting to some of that point. I will say, in expectation, randomization ensures that both groups are balanced baseline for whatever that's worth. But you're getting to an important point. How about this question? Let's say you're the statistician that you are trying to replicate their results. Okay, you're trying to replicate their results given only what was provided in this methodology section. You guys use R. What do you use? R, SAS, whatever. R. What function would you use to try to get their results? Let's say they got well, okay, to calculate the odds ratio, let's say, and maybe you don't know it, that's fine. But let's say these results, what functions do you think they use to get these results? If you have to try to reproduce the study.
I can use the table one package.
Okay, so maybe something about a table. Okay, so they created a table, like a 2x2 table, and maybe did like a chi-square test on that. Any other thoughts? What sort of functions maybe they used? So let's say we're calculating an odds ratio, and they did a chi-square test. They chi-square.temp, and they have a table. What's another way in which you've encountered an odds ratio before in your own work?
Logistic regression.
Okay, a logistic regression can provide odds ratios too. What's the difference between a logistic regression and odds ratio calculated from a logistic regression and one just directly from the 2x2 table? In general.
Response variable.
No, the response variable would be the same for both, whether they missed an appointment or not. That's true.
The logic of the log of contribution, which is
okay, so actually for logistic regression, looking at log odds, but you can still, get an odds ratio somehow. Okay. Any other ideas? Maybe just generically, let's say you're looking at some sort of categorical data analysis. You can just do a 2x2 table or like a k by whatever r by c table. Calculate an odds ratio. Actually, no, it has to be 2x2 with an odds ratio. You can do an odds ratio with just a chi-square test. But you've seen that in a logistic regression model, you can calculate odds ratio too, right? You can just exponentiate those data coefficients. What's the difference between these two things? They're both called odds ratios. So we can't calculate a risk ratio specifically from logistic regression. You need to be able to calculate. But what's the difference between an odds ratio? Both of these things give you odds ratios. What's the difference? And I'm being slightly.
Is it like significance?
No, you can get p-values from. The chi-square test will give you a p-value.
Yeah.
And you'll find that the p-value is equivalent, let's say, to what you get from logistic regression.
What about the maybe latent relationship among other variables as well?
Sure. So you can think of a logistic regression model as a latent variable model with some error variance. That's not quite. This is a very basic difference between, let's say, logistic regression model and a chi-square test. Like, pretend that you don't all have, in a year, master's degrees. Yeah, pretend this is your first class in statistics. You just learned about logistic regression, chi-square tests. What's the difference between these two things?
Because in with logistic regression, you can model, you can have both continuous variables and categorical variables together.
Great. That's certainly one difference, right? At the core of it, what difference are you getting? What can a logistic regression do that maybe just looking at a 2x2 table doesn't like? Sorry? That's a good answer. You can still calculate the standard error of your estimates for both approaches. So with 10 minutes left, with logistic regression models, you can control for other variables, right? You can look at more than two variables at once, right? You can calculate adjusted odds ratios. What is the odds ratio adjusting for things like X, Y, Z? So they didn't do that in their model. They looked at all these differences or all these potential things as baseline covariates. They looked at who the provider was. Maybe one doctor was really good. Maybe one doctor just didn't care about their patients. But then, these are all things that maybe we wanted to adjust for, right? So adjusting for the patient's sex, age, what type of procedure they went into the hospital for, what was the odds ratio of missed appointments between group A and group B. So the big thing that I would have liked for them to have done is actually adjust for some of those. They collected a lot of data. They didn't use it. The only thing they did was calculate an odds ratio, right? Two groups, yes or no. So again, nothing they did was wrong per se, but that doesn't mean that it was well conducted. I think a stronger analysis would have been, this also holds even after adjusting for X, Y, Z. Any quick questions before we move on to the main example? All right. So the next example is pretty highly cited. It's an educational policy. And I'll just briefly tell you what they did. They were looking at international students in Malaysia. So at the top universities in Malaysia, they attract international students who want to study there. As you might imagine, it could be difficult to assimilate into, go to school in a culture that's not necessarily one that you grew up in. So they were looking at international students who went to college in Malaysia. They're looking at 4 attitudes: integration, separation, assimilation, and marginalization. And there are different categories of how well you fit or assimilated or integrated into Malaysian culture. And so what they did was they had a study where they gave a survey to all of these thousands of international students in Malaysia, captured things like how well do you think you fit into Malaysian culture, how proficient are you, these universities were in English, how proficient are you with English, let's say, do you watch Malaysian TV, these sorts of things. They were given a survey, they responded, and they analyzed the data. So the paper is called Integrating Two Cultures Successfully, Factors Influencing Acculturation Attitude of International Postgraduate Students in Malaysia. So again, it's easier to find things that might be wrong when you're told that they're a mistake. I don't like the title. I'm just gonna say that. There's already a statistical problem with the title. Any issues with that you can identify with? There are only, like 15 words. So it has to be one of them. What potential issues do you see with the title and what you know about this? I'll say this is also this is a really good journal. They've been cited, 40 times or so. People like the paper. There's a lot wrong with it. I'll say that much, including the title. What don't we like about the title? Okay, the word influencing. Why don't you like the word influencing?
It's like it's called influencing you want.
Yeah, great. Perfect. So this is an observational study, and we can't make causal statements like this influences that or this causes that, right? Can someone, yeah?
Bias integrating two cultures.
Okay, so maybe that's like an educational policy type question. I don't have an issue with that statistically, but they're trying to see whether you can integrate Malaysian culture with your own home culture, when you go to college in Malaysia, and whether that's successful or not. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't do education policy. I do think that's the word that is used in education policy. But yeah, influencing, right? That implies a causal relationship between the two. So why is it dangerous to make a causal conclusion from an observational study? Or why is that inappropriate?
The observational study only by the relationship.
Right. So observational studies are useful. They can tell us that there's a relationship between things, some association, but not necessarily causal, right? Can someone give me an example of when you might have a relationship that's not causal? Yeah.
Gosh, like the, I'm having a brain. I'm so sorry. It just left my head.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
Maybe relate.
Okay. I might argue that that's a little bit tricky to see. An age being related to certain disease where that might not be causal. Okay, how about a ridiculous example? Can someone come up with a ridiculous example? Yeah.
Student academic excellence, try to look at maybe gender.
Okay, so sure, something more ridiculous. Yeah.
Something, so white people are oh, smart, and then everyone else, but it's like, that's ridiculous, and they draw that picture, oh, this university that's predominantly white and has, people that are used to that environment, maybe as a smaller, minority population. Drawing a relationship.
Okay.
More social than like really dependent on the race.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So you're getting at an important concept there. One more example.
There appears to be an association between the popularity of the person Christopher and burglaries.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, there's a great website, right? So just because things might be associated with each other, might be correlated, doesn't mean that there's technically a causal relationship there, right? So I'm not very tall. Did you know that taller children are better at math than shorter children? It's true. Who believes me when I think taller children are better at math than shorter children? It's true.
You can see the blackboard here, or the peers.
Yeah? Who doesn't think that's true? Why is that not true? Yeah.
Might be related to the families, responses, because parents are more attention to the student health and education.
Okay, not quite it. Let's say there's a very specific reason why taller children are do better on math.
You can cheat recently.
Sorry?
More people taller.
Okay, perhaps.
You can look at other people's papers. I don't know, like.
Oh, no, okay. Well, okay, 5 minutes left. So taller children tend to be older, right? And older children take more math classes, have taken more math, so they do better on math, right? So once you control for something like age, taller children are no longer better than short children at math, right? So even though that statement is true, there's a strong relationship there. It was confounded by age, let's say. So observational studies don't give you the ability to make causal statements. You can only find these sorts of associations. So I don't like the word association. So I'll again tell you that there's something very problematic with this study design. So there are about 3,200 international students at these 6 universities in Malaysia. They did their survey, 1,300 were received. Their response rate was 41%. Only some of them were completely usable. What's your reaction to the fact that their response rate was just 40% in the survey that they got?
People who, I guess, were more successful at duration were like,
Certainly, right? So this is a threat to the validity of our study, right? They wanted to generalize it to international students in Malaysia, but they might not necessarily have a representative sample. So they could have a selection bias. In this case, quite a bad selection bias. Part of their survey, part of their scale was how comfortable are you with English, and the higher you are, the more acculturated you are, and the survey was given in English. So, you know, maybe that is a huge response bias. If you weren't very acculturated to life in Malaysia at these universities, maybe you wouldn't have answered the survey because you just didn't like English. So yeah, so we get a big selection bias issue here, which means that our results might not be generalizable to the population that they actually want to make conclusions on, right? The whole point of statistics, you want to make a conclusion about a population, you must make do with a sample somehow and make inferences on that sample be generalizable to the population. If your sample is very unlike your population, then you're just not going to get effective results. Let's just do one last point. There's a lot wrong with this. So I'm going to tell you what their goal was and how their data looked, right? So students could fall under one of 4 categories. Okay, marginalization, separation, assimilation, or integration. Focus on table 6, which looked at the results of linear regression for separation. Okay, so again, describe, evaluate, suggest. What do you think their model was for separation? Try to describe what their model was, and evaluate whether that was successful or not. Maybe suggest something that might be a little bit better. So what sort of model do you think they fit for, quote, separation? What do you think their data look like? What models did they fit? This will be the last thing between you and lunch. If you had to code this in R, what function would you have used for this? Okay, that will be the question a lot. Okay, so what function would you have used?
GLN.
They didn't use GLN, they should use LN. Just LN. Okay, they use LN, okay, so linear regression model in R. What do you think their outcome variable looks like? Describe their outcome variable. Based on what you know from what I've told you about this study. What was their outcome variable? What did it look like? Yeah, actually, it was binary. They did a linear model on a binary outcome, 0 and 1, which you're all taught that's like 100% not okay. In some situations, it's okay. But generally, you have to have a very good reason why you're doing that. What is your impression on them using a linear regression model on the binary outcome of do you feel like you belong in the separation? Yes or no? What's the central issue? Yeah.
You talked about international, even if they're integrated into the culture, they might still think of themselves as not part of the.
Sure. Certainly. I'll also say this wasn't provided to you. Actually, based on the survey responses, the authors categorize the students into these four. Yeah, sorry. So the students would have like, do you watch Malaysian TV? Do you eat Malaysian food? And then the authors would categorize.
I guess it should be continuous. It's just
okay.
No categorical.
Yeah.
Questions that they.
Yeah, right. So it seems a little weird that, you know, we usually use linear regression models for continuous variables and they have a categorical outcome here, which seems strange, right? Yeah, so their entire model isn't that great. I'll also say that the way that they describe things is the model is significant. And then they focus on things like R squared. They don't like interpret the coefficients well. They do a very poor job of explaining results. There's a lot wrong. One last thing that I don't like, they have p-values of exactly 0. That's impossible, right? It's below whatever, you know, less than 0.0001 or whatever. But just last thing, so we've evaluated their model as not being very successful in a statistical sense and just like not being that appropriate. Their outcome is categorical, right? It's an ordered categorical model, right? Marginalization, separation, assimilation, integration. So if you had to perhaps suggest a model that would be more appropriate for their outcome, what type of model might you suggest for them? Okay, logistic regressions for binary outcomes. But their category has, they have 4 categories. So what do you think? Okay, multinomial logistic regression. Sorry?
Yeah, like the one that considered a function.
Oh, it's an ordinal, yeah, ordinal regression model. Certainly. So we might suggest a more appropriate model for them, like ordinal or multinomial. There's a lot more wrong with this paper. What I like about this paper is that it's actually written very well. So like students can't like criticize the writing or anything. It's actually written quite well. There's a lot of statistical issues. All right, so that's basically it. Sorry, we're a little bit late because I'm just bad at directions. But you know, overall message through this exercise of looking at other people's work, you can begin to identify, you know, you are all really good at maybe identifying potential problems with other people's work, but people are really blind to their own work, right? So like, why do you not have that same, some words I don't know in English, the sheet. Yeah, attention to detail, right? Why do you not look as closely into your own work as you do when you're trying to look at other people's work? So keep that same mindset of, you know, looking at other people's work to your own, and then maybe that will really help you improve your own work, right? Having this critical eye of improvement, constant improvement for your own work will make you a better collaborative and being able to explain what you're trying to do to others. Any questions before lunch? And I'll be around, floating around.
And you're staying for lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention for the BC TIP interns, there's a career panel at 1. And here, if you want to join, we have people from all industries, CRO, pharma, academia. You're welcome to join us. Not required, but you can.
Is this in here?
It's here. Yeah, the speakers are all virtual. They're working. They'll be joining us over the Zoom. Otherwise, go enjoy lunch. We have some sauce.
Yeah, that's not right next to 10.
So we have our interns here who are, I guess we have the HIP interns, and then we have 2 BC TIP interns, I think. Okay, so I guess we'll start. I have some questions, so we'll start with those, and then we can move on if anyone else has any questions. So first, Grace, can you start by introducing yourself and tell us what you do?
Yeah, definitely. So hi, everyone. First, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak at this panel. It's really exciting to see everyone and talk about my experience. So I'm currently a biostatistician at the Harvard Center for Biostatistics and AIDS Research. We call it CBAR, so I'll use that acronym. It's shorter. So I graduated from the Master's of Biostatistics program at Duke in 2023. Prior to that, I interned with Duke CFAR, of course, in 2022, and I continued my project in that internship as my master's project. So it's a little bit extra detail. And I'm originally from Norwich, Connecticut.
Leah.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. Leah Davis. I am a graduate from 2017, and I'd been working at Duke Hospital before that in statistics and just urology, sort of general research. And I worked with DCI at the Cancer Center as a statistician for a couple of years, and then transferred over to a CRO for just under a year, and then moved over to the pharma side, working at UCB, which is a Belgian pharmaceutical company, as a biostatistician.
Cool. We lost one of our panelists in the transition, but hopefully she'll join. So we'll start with questions and then go back if they're able to join. So Grace, you can start. How did you get your current role? So I guess that's the first part of the question. How did you get your current role?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story. So I went to Connecticut College for my undergrad, and from there I knew someone above me who now works at CBAR. She had been, so this was the fall of 2022 that I found out about CBAR and that they were looking for a biostatistician. And the student who currently works there, she had been working there for about a year, and she and I went to the same college, and we connected again through a college alumni panel. And she reached out to me and said, "Hey, I think you'd be a really good fit for this position based on the research experience you mentioned in the panel," which was the research experience from Duke CFAR. And so we talked a little bit, and she helped me with the interviewing process, which was really great, really nice of her. So this was a networking moment that was really important for me. And after that, I interviewed for the position in early February. And from that, I actually was hired pretty early, around end of February. And so that's how I got into my current position, and I've been here for about a year. prior to hearing about CBAR, I had never heard about even, I never really thought about working at the place, let alone Harvard University. And it actually ended up being a really good situation because I'm from Connecticut, and it's a hybrid position that I'm working at. So I'm able to commute to work. I hope that's not too much detail, but that's how it kind of worked out, and it worked out really nicely. So I definitely recommend staying in touch with people that could possibly offer those opportunities.
Cool. Okay, I think we're gonna skip back now. So Xiaowang, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your current position?
Sure. Hi, I'm Gao I'm currently working at Pinterest as a data scientist. I graduated from Duke in 2015, so it's been a while. After graduation, I did an internship at Max Point, a digital marketing company, on sentiment analysis. After that, I moved to Boston and started to work at TripAdvisor as a data scientist. In 2019, I joined Twitter and working at Twitter for 4 years until Elon took over. Yeah, so that's.
You've been at Pinterest since then?
Yes. Yeah, I've been working at Pinterest since then.
And John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone. Sorry, I hopped on a little late. I'm John. I graduated from the PhD program in 2020. May 2020 was when I defended. So right in the thick of the pandemic. I was I worked in the department prior to starting my PhD, and then I got to work with a lot of different faculty members, and right after since I defended during the pandemic, really a lot of jobs were not hiring, or they rescinded some of their offers. So I was fortunate actually to work at the VA, got an offer at the Department of Veterans Affairs so it's a government position. The VA is right next to Hawk, where you guys are sitting. And I was working there as a faculty statistician for 3 years, and primarily working in the health services and research department. And then after that, recently moved to industry. So now I'm working at AstraZeneca as a statistician, working in late phase vaccines and immune therapy trials. So so I guess my career post PhD has kind of gone through several trajectories in different sectors. And I plan on sticking in industry for the foreseeable future.
Okay, so we're going to jump back to Leah. Leah, how did you get your, is the volume need to be up a little bit? Or is it okay? Okay, you can start talking and I'll put volume up.
Was the question how I got my current position?
Yeah, how you got your current position.
So like I mentioned, I was at a CRO for a brief period of time, and I didn't love it, and started looking around for other opportunities. And one of the things that wasn't abundantly clear to me, sort of moving from academia to industry and in the CRO world, just sort of what the differences were working in a CRO versus working for an actual pharma company. And so I'd been on LinkedIn and seen an interesting post from someone just sort of discussing those differences. And I reached out to him on LinkedIn asking if maybe we could discuss a little bit. And he was very, very friendly and set up a Zoom call just to meet and talk. And during that call, he was really interested in sort of my academic experience, and he happened to be hiring at UCB on his team, and he invited me to apply for that position. And I reached out to a couple of other people. I just sort of hunted around and found on LinkedIn to ask them what their experience was at UCB. And I ended up taking the position. And like John, I don't see myself moving out of industry in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I can adjust the volume.
Go ahead, you just keep going.
Okay, so moving on from that, I guess let's start with Grace. What do you do in your current role? What do you do in your current role? What kind of projects do you work on?
Yeah, definitely. So right now I'm working on a couple projects, a couple studies, and within those studies, I'm working on a couple projects. So the first project that I worked on when I started was part of my training, and it's an exploratory analysis that's kind of finishing up, looking at the effect of a broadly neutralizing antibody called VRC01. It's a little technical, but it's looking at the effect of this on growth measurements. So they picked the project that was kind of easy and like tangible to think about as a new biostatistician. And this is a project I've been working on to finish, which is nice. And I'll just add one thing. This is a project, all the people who work on these training projects finish their project to the end, and there will be a manuscript that you work on and you'll have your name on it. So that's a nice bonus that like it's a real project that you get to be a part of. The other project that I started in this past April is also an exploratory analysis, looking at the acceptability and tolerability of long-acting injectables for adolescents and teens with HIV. So that's what I'm working on right now. There's a couple other projects coming up. As far as daily tasks, I do a lot of statistical programming in SAS. I use that software for data analysis, data cleaning, things like that. And I'm also doing report writing for the projects I'm working on, investigating data here and there. I'm also part of study teams, of course, and there's a lot of collaboration that goes into there. Another thing that I'm a part of is a committee, which is kind of like a CBAR service. So part of my CBAR is the name of my workplace, and everyone is part of a committee where they're working on some sort of bigger goal to contribute to CBAR. And so I'm working on study results submissions to clinicaltrials.gov. Okay. So those are the main tasks that I work on in my job.
And Leah, what do you work on? What kind of projects do you work on, or what's your current role?
So I work in an area sort of related to what John is working on, but it's sort of the next phase of drug development. So we are called sort of launch or health technology assessment, or HTA. And it's a branch of statistics that is post phase 3 or the regulatory submissions. So like the phase 3 assess the safety and efficacy, and launch comes in after that. And we focus on how much value a treatment brings compared to what's already on the market. And so more comparative efficacy. So once regulatory approval happens, our group takes on, and we do all of the analyses that are required to get a drug reimbursed by every country and put on their formulary. So we do a ton of post-hoc analysis of the phase 3 trial data, a lot of publications, sort of working with medical writers and the physicians, et cetera, who are working on the trials. And then analysis-wise, we do a lot of indirect comparisons. So network meta-analysis and matching adjusted indirect comparisons. And that's so analysis specifically to make comparisons between drugs that weren't compared directly in clinical trials. So we support all the analytics that are needed for cost effectiveness models and other economic models. Let's see. Yeah, I actually don't do any programming at all. I've touched R a tiny bit in 3.5 years, mostly when we just had something that was so urgent that we didn't really have time to explain what we needed to programmers and had to figure it out. And we don't really do a lot of report writing and stuff like that either, as we work with a lot of medical writers. So we spend a lot of time just sort of collaborating and helping our colleagues understand what analyses they can do and what they would need to best tell the story of our drug, and then to help facilitate getting all of those analyses done.
I know Grace and Leah answered this question earlier, but Galor, I want to go back to how did you get your current position?
Sure. So my career at Twitter was very productive. I got promoted twice within 4 years. But however, after Elon took over, the Twitter has a dramatic change. And the majority of my team members got laid off because of Elon. So I feel my career path didn't have a good, have a promising future. So I decided to leave and to change a company. And at that time, my previous manager at Twitter left Twitter already, and I told him I wanted to leave as well. So he referred me to another manager at Pinterest and connected us. So we had a chat, and we felt it might be a good opportunity for me. So we set up the introduction recruiter core and started from there. But actually the position I was referred to was not the position I actually got into. So during the interview, one interviewer was very interested in my skills, and I also found it's a better fit. So I talked to that interviewer, and they decided to change my position to another position in that interviewer's team. However, half years later, I actually switched to another team again, because of the position fit and the management change. So I think to get to the position, I think networking is very important. Have a good relationship with your managers and coworkers are also very important.
John, do you have a good story of how you got your current position? Since we heard these 3 others now, I don't want to leave you out.
Sorry, position where?
At your current position, how did you?
Oh, yeah. I so before I started my the PhD program at Duke, so actually the PhD program started. So I was in the first cohort of the program. before it all started, I was working in the biostat core. And one of my colleagues there, he had gone through the CRO, pharma route, and I actually wanted a change from working at the VA and working in government in academia. So I contacted him, and he told me that his group was hiring. They had some products in the pipeline that they were working on. And so I reached out, and he was working at AstraZeneca, and he still works at AstraZeneca. Do you know, is Lane gonna talk to the students?
No, she's not.
Oh, okay. So yeah,
She still teaches in the master's program.
I'm sorry?
She still teaches in the master's program.
Oh, yeah, right. So anyway, so he is so my friend, yeah, he's married to one of the faculty members in the department. But anyway, he was able to refer me, and I was able to go through the process pretty seamlessly. But yeah, like Gowan said, like networking is really key. I think the age of submitting your resume and having it die in some black box or whatever, wherever it lands, is kind of outdated. I think it's really, and Leah's story too. Like she met someone that she connected with, and they had a rapport, and they were able to she was able to go to a new company. So yeah, I think networking and keeping in touch with people like over the years, I think is very helpful, because I mean it's been almost at least 5 or 7 years since I reached out to my friend who was working at AstraZeneca. So definitely keeping in touch with those former colleagues.
I actually do have an add-on question for you. So you're the only one here who has a PhD, and you worked prior to getting your PhD. So I'm curious why you decided to go back and get a PhD, and do you feel like it's paid off?
Yeah, I think so I really wanted to, really have the dedicated time to focus on a research topic. And I think that's really the big difference between, like master's and a PhD. The master's, you get the fundamentals that you need to be very productive in, anywhere you go. But I think for a PhD, you really can focus your energy for, a couple of years on a particular topic of interest. And then you become an expert in that particular topic. A lot of my classmates, they either focus on machine learning, they're now working in Apple, they're working at Meta. I worked on problems in statistical genetics and flow cytometry, so a lot of omics type data. And others chose to stay in academia, and they really like that academic life. One of my classmates, he just became associate professor at Yale, so he just got promoted. So I think as a PhD student, you just have that time to really focus on a particular problem or a particular area, and you really get to focus for a couple of years on that. And in terms of paying off, in industry, at least what I'm seeing is it's really, the degree only goes so far in terms of like what you're able to do with it. I think that, for us, at least in our group, there's really, everybody works together as a team. Like you cannot, no one is their own silo. Like you have to work in a team to accomplish anything in industry. Like if you go out, do things by yourself, you're just going to just crash and burn. Like there's tight timelines, a lot of deliverables. And so, yeah, you have to work as a team, but at the same time, you can use your knowledge to really, to help sort of guide certain things, in a certain way. For example, right, we've been focused recently on RSV, this RSV product, and we're just starting the trials out, and it definitely the initial part, the startup of this trials definitely needs a lot of design aspects, and so that's something that I could contribute to, and I think having that broader knowledge of the literature of a certain method definitely helps to contribute to the team. But yeah, I mean, in industry, you can't do anything on your own. I mean, you have to do it in a group to accomplish anything.
So I'll start with Gawong for this one. What factors did you consider in applying to or accepting your current position? You touched on this a little bit, but like what was important to you and when you were selecting or accepting your current position?
So I have seen some people who can succeed in all environments. But I'm not that kind. I can only work in a suitable environment or a right fit for me. And also, I think that's the key for your career success in the long term. So when I choose another company or another position, the key thing to me is the career success in the long term. The position fit, the challenging part of it, and the skill set match are all important. I want to make sure it's challenging enough, but it's not too challenging, so I can reach it step by step. And I need to make sure the managers and the coworkers are good, also suitable for my career growth. So to summarize, I think the career growth, the skill set match, and the team domain match as the three factors that are super important to me when I change a position.
Okay, great. Can you answer that question as well? Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah. What factors did you consider in applying to and accepting your current position?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I was looking for was a workplace that has a lot of support and from your supervisor, from your colleagues. I found that going through school, I really thrived in an environment where I had enough support to get me to a certain place and make me feel like I'm, supported. Like I feel like I can grow. And I also considered having a place where the training program, like the quality of the training that they give to the new employees is like very strong. I wanted to make sure that I was like set up for success, that I had the tools necessary to go into this new position, especially my first job after school. So that's obviously a big jump for many people. And so that's why I considered that factor as well. Another factor that came up, I wasn't initially considering, but it came up in like the interviewing process, was how long people have been working at the workplaces that you're looking at. And at the workplace I'm working at, there are people who've been there for a couple years, and there are people who've been there for like 30 years. And I feel like that's a really good sign that like people like working there, like they enjoy the workplace and the people and the kind of work that they're doing. I also considered the location of the places that I was applying to. I'm from Connecticut, and CBAR is it's in Boston, which obviously worked out well. But when I was initially applying to jobs, I was applying to a lot of jobs in near Duke, in the Research Triangle area. And so, because obviously I was already there, it would have been really convenient to stay in that area. Obviously, there's a lot of job opportunities in that area as well. But life happened and I was offered this opportunity at CBAR, and so that also worked out. But I think the biggest thing is support. And I just feel like another thing I really liked when I was interviewing for CBAR was that you would have not only a supervisor, but also a mentor. And that would be someone who's in a similar role as you. So it's an additional layer of support that I think has been really great. And I've really been enjoying working at CBAR. The training program is really thorough. I'll just add on to that. And they do a really good job at making sure you're up to speed. Another thing I'll just add is that you don't have to know SAS coming in, but you're basically using SAS for 90% of the things that you're working on. And if you want to use R, you can later on when you're more experienced. But they train you in SAS, and they have a lot of built-in projects to make sure that you're up to speed and are ready to take off after about a 4-month training program usually. I also want to add that I didn't add before. There are a couple networks that are within my workplace, and so each network is for a specific types of studies. So there's ACTG, or there's IMPACT, which is an acronym for a network of individuals who are all working on studies involving pregnant women and children and infants. And there's another network called ACTG that is for studies focusing on adult populations. And there's another network as well, but it's not as large as those two. So I just wanted to add that because there's a lot of different projects that you can work on, not just HIV, but split into different study populations. So it's really interesting. Sorry.
Leah, you're good. Leah, what do you like the most and the least about your current position?
I think start with the most. I really love working in a really cross-functional team. So we get to work with so many different people, from physicians to health economists to real world evidence people, the trial statisticians, all different people who are all working like sort of to the same goal. And so I feel like we're surrounded by really clever people with really different backgrounds and different functions. And we get to sort of help shape the strategy and story of a drug as it launches into the world. And so just being a part of that big team where you really feel like you're accomplishing something together and learning from each other, I think is my favorite part. I also really love that we do different things all the time. So it's not sort of same thing day in, day out. There's always some new challenge, which keeps it interesting. And there is a ton of autonomy. So we're just kind of left to our own devices to do our job as we see fit, which at this point in my career, I love, but I also have a team. And like John said, having a team that you can lean on or help out is absolutely key. And we have that, but we have a lot of autonomy, but we also have management and the upper levels in stats who will have your back whenever you need it, no matter what, but no micromanagement. So I just really like how our team functions. And you never feel alone, which is great. My least favorite parts, I would say work-life balance sometimes. We do get hit with last-minute deadlines sometimes. You can't predict it. It just happens. And sometimes they all happen at the same time, and just juggling all the things coming in can be a little bit difficult. And also, because I work for a company that's located in Belgium, we have people from all over the world, and the majority of the employees are in Europe. So it's 6 hours ahead. So 6:30 in the morning meetings are very frequent for me. So that's not my favorite. But I'm not very many complaints about my position at all.
John, what are the most and least favorite parts of the position?
Yeah, I think I agree with Leah. I think the team aspect of is probably my favorite part. I think it's, everybody plays to their own strengths, and I think everybody kind of works together to deliver, something, especially in our group, which is the late phase group. So our group is, we work on the efficacy trials, like right up until FDA approval for the drug. So I think it's really nice to see, everybody working together to get that, to make that happen. Least favorite thing. I mean, I haven't really seen it too much, but I've already seen it like affecting some of my colleagues. I think some of the politics that come into play. I mean, it's not, I think that happens in a lot of different places, but I do think there are some, I think the politics in play sometimes just, it doesn't make the work environment fun, especially when you see it happen to others in your group. Yeah.
I'd like to add same. I forgot that one, but I'll
Yeah.
add that as well.
Politics are no fun.
Yeah.
In any setting. I mean, it doesn't allow you, like Leah said, like she likes the autonomy, but sometimes it is a detriment to the autonomy. It hampers autonomy sometimes when, you think you have autonomy in something, but really your hands are tied because someone like 2 steps above you is not going to let that happen. So.
Okay, so we have about 15 more minutes. So I do have questions I can ask, but I want to give you all a chance to ask questions. And it would be helpful if you ask towards like a specific person. Does anyone have questions? I know you're not usually not shy. Ashley.
This isn't really geared towards a specific person, but like as someone who is graduating from the Master of Biostatistics program this upcoming May and like working on my resume and getting ready to enter the job search process, is there anything that you recommend, like skills having or just things on resumes or in cover letters in general that can really set you apart?
So I think John maybe.
So recently, I'm a big fan of using ChatGPT to write your stuff. I mean, it's not like don't just trust ChatGPT to to get you something polished, but definitely use it as a template for I don't know, a cover letter, because cover letters I think are. I don't know. I don't know how many people often like look at them, but I think they're helpful and helps to like sort of distinguish between someone who doesn't have one and someone who does have one. I mean, I think it just adds an extra layer of personalization to the application. So yeah, I mean, I would use ChatGPT to actually like take the job description or online, whatever, LinkedIn or whatever the site, and then merge it with your resume. You can ask ChatGPT so many questions and have it like simplify your cover letter as many ways as possible.
Grace, you want to answer that too? Your 1 year.
Yeah, so one thing that I did in my resume was I highlighted my master's project, and I really highlighted all the skills and the experiences that I had from that, because obviously it's like the most recent experience and it's something that you've really delved deep into. And so I tried to highlight the things that I did, and especially in the interviewing process, like how those skills would help me in as an applicant in the process of interviewing for these positions. Yeah, because when I was interviewing for CBAR, as well as other jobs, I was mostly talking about my research experience. So it's definitely really good to be very familiar about that, and to see the clear connection between like the experience you've done and the jobs you're applying to. I know that's a little general, but I thought that was really helpful. And of course, there's other experiences you've had. So it's always good to highlight like the main skills you've gained throughout that as well. But I imagine employers probably want to hear a lot about your master's project, because you've put so much work and effort and time into that. Yeah.
Any other questions? Laura? Yeah. Chrissy.
So I know Grace said cheat codes and stats mostly, and Leah, you said R if you have to. What else do you, like, John and Gawan, what do you guys code in?
Gawan, what do you use? Because you're more on the data science side.
Oh, you mean software?
Yeah.
So that's one of the reason when I graduated in 2015, I think almost all of my classmates went to CRO or pharmaceutical companies. But for me, I did an internship at clinical institute, a research institute, but I found it's not a good fit for me. I wanted to go to tech at that time. But at that time, I didn't have a good idea about like which tech to go to, what tech looks like. So I took some courses that I think that would be helpful, like the statistical computing by Professor Kliban. And it turned out very useful, because obviously tech doesn't use SAS, and very few people use R. So basically Python is a major language.
And John, do you program at all anymore?
Yeah, we use R. I mean, R for primarily like research type simulations, but anything regulatory meaning everything that's sent to the FDA usually has to be programmed in SAS. So there is SAS and R. We use Python. Our data science group uses Python. So there might be an occasion where, like, if we wanted something nice for visualization, we might use Python. But for my day-to-day, it's R or SAS.
So do you personally still program? Do you touch data yourself?
Yeah, sometimes I have to. Yeah, like for this startup, for the trial startup, when we're starting up the phase 3 studies, we have several phase 3 studies, and the phase 2 as well. Like, we use R. I'll use R to do the simulations to look at different scenarios. Yeah, so that's what I've used like in the past few months. But I think as we go on and actually like start reading out the trials, we'll use SAS.
Well, Minaj.
Yes, I have a question for Yue Jiang. I am very interested in the field of data science. So what kind of skills do you think I need to highlight if I want to get a job in data science? And also I have a lot of advice on kind of writing lead code problems or putting your projects into GitHub. Do you think these are important at all, or is there any other skills that I should focus on?
I think data science is a very broad term nowadays. So if you look at the job descriptions, and you'll notice there are actually different tracks in data science right now. For example, using like Airbnb as an example, they have like mainly three tracks. One is analytics, another is algorithm, and the last is the inference. So basically, analytics is basically you need to have good product sense, good analytical skills like good visualization, good storytelling, and like data manipulation skills. And the inference is basically about statistical inference. So others like statistical modelings. And the algorithm is mostly about machine learning. So I think it depends on which track you want to go to. And your resume should also adjust by the different track or different job requirement. So for your specific question on the GitHub or that, I think that's like basic requirements you should know if you want to join tech. But I do know like Duke has now has a lot of good courses to help you prepare on that, like the statistical computing or around like Python, big data, PySpark, GitHub, like basically the code base database around that. Did that answer all of your questions? I feel like you asked multiple questions.
Yes, I very helpful. And I think like lead code questions, I think it kind of belongs to what you answered. Yeah, it answered the question.
Okay.
Any other questions? I'll ask one more. Okay. So we'll go back to John. What would be important to you in your next job search that may not have been as obvious when you first graduated?
Not obvious when I graduated. Yeah, I mean, when I graduated, it was a different time. I mean, it was the pandemic, like right, like in the thick of the pandemic. So I think definitely my initial plan was to go into industry, and I think that got hampered by the global circumstances. I do think I have a little bit more, I think when you're coming out of fresh from any program, you have this, it tend to have an eagerness to do everything. Like everything is interesting. You want to appear like you're interested in, whatever is out there. But I think over time, I think it's good to hone in on like what you want your career to be. Like I think it's helpful to know that that you can contact like Leo is doing, like you can contact people like on LinkedIn or through networking or through like a friend of a friend, that you can contact them and talk to them about different companies. So I think when I was starting out, I didn't do much of that, but now that, you know, I think that have more connections, I think I'm using those more effectively. And I think that's important. So I mean, if you definitely want to get a good head start, and definitely it's helpful to find connections and then, you know, ask for their connections as well to other companies or to other industries, or whatever you're interested in. Because, you know, they might bounce you around a little bit. Like they might know someone, and then, you know, that person can refer you to another person who's more appropriate, but eventually you'll end it. You'll end up at the right person to talk to. And so I think, you know, being able to network is something that I wish I'd known better. I'd done a better job of.
How this, end on happening?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, yes, please do.
Hi guys, I don't think you can see me, but I'm Laura. I'm the career person in the department now. Post Ellen. Hi, Graves. But networking is such a big thing that all of you mentioned. And it can seem so large and daunting and no real immediacy in like what you're doing. What is a thing that these folks can do this week? A small thing that you think might help them in their career plan or in their network? Grace, can you go first?
Could I have a little bit to think about it? Maybe someone else go first. Thank you.
Of course. Does anyone want to answer that with one thing they can do this
Take
week?
one. Add all of us on LinkedIn.
That's a good one.
Thank you, Leah. Everyone's over here, guys.
No, I think just reaching out to groups on LinkedIn, like if there's specific topic groups that you're interested in, you just start to see who the players are in that field and that area. And you can see what topics are of interest in that field and sort of what's happening. Like there are certain groups, like I've joined statistician in pharma group, and I'm part of some like sort of interest groups there, and you just sort of see who the people are who are leaders in the field, who have a lot to say. And if ever you have questions and stuff like that, just reach out to them. And people are very responsive.
Thank you.
Also be prepared. I think it's better for you to have a good understanding of like what you want to do, what position, what track you want to go to, and then have a list of questions in your mind before talking to them, so that the conversation is more meaningful to both of you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've done that. There was one time, like pretty recently, like, you know, in the last few years where I did that and I wasn't prepared, or I was not as prepared as I could have been. And I don't know, it ended up being almost an interrogation type meeting instead of like a meet and greet. So definitely, I think, yeah, definitely be prepared. That's a good one. That's good advice.
Yeah,
I would add to that too, to look, like really look into the companies or organizations that you're applying to. And I've noticed, like at my company at least, they tend to ask you very specifically and directly why you're interested in that company specifically. So really just sort of get to know the companies and organizations you're applying to and interested in, and to see what about them makes you want to be there.
Yeah. It's a question you can prepare for sure. Grace, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say that, yeah, I agree with everyone that like it's, yeah, I'm happy to talk to people, because like even if you may not be like specifically interested in this in working in academia, like at least it's like you're talking to people who are like working in a similar, and as biostatisticians, or like similar roles that you might be interested in. I know like I really appreciated having the connection to CBAR, and I think I wouldn't have found out about it otherwise. It's like I was focusing more on Duke. And so I thought that was really helpful. Also, in preparation, I agree as well, is really important. When I met with the person who connected me, I listed all the questions that I had, all the things that I wanted to know, and it was just a really productive meeting where I learned a lot about the benefits and all the things that she's been doing in her role. And yeah, so just to add to that.
And I'll give Grace a shout out. She helped one of our recent grads who's about to start a job in Grace's office quite soon. So
Yeah, she
answered a
started
lot of
last
questions.
week.
Yep. Yay!
Yeah. Yeah.
So people helping people, but staying in touch with people and asking questions, being prepared. Thank you all for that guidance. That was really helpful.
Yeah, and I know we're at the end of the hour, a little over. So I really appreciate you all taking time out of your busy work day to give us some feedback, and hopefully it will prepare people as they start to apply to jobs in the next few months. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye.